Annika, thanks for joining us on the podcast. Do you just want to start with a quick introduction of yourself and your business, and then we'll take it from there?
Sure. Thank you, Tom, for the invite. So I was originally a museum art restorer. I used to work for Tate about a decade ago, and it was there that I was inspired to found my own business. I was feeling a lot of pain, let's say. It was a job that was, supposed to be my dream job, and I was really excited to get it and work with this kind of world class, very prestigious collection. But then it turned into a little bit of a nightmare because it was a pretty toxic working environment. It was full of lots of bureaucracy, lots of paperwork, lots of politics, lots of kind of clickiness and just like also not very much pay. And the whole idea about the low pay thing was supposed to be that, but you get to work with this fantastic and amazing art collection, right? Except that I would have these masterpieces on my bench and instead have to go fill in triplicate forms and answer 300 emails a day. And, it was drowning in paperwork. And when the iPad came out, we were all really excited about the potential and possibilities of, a digital future. And so our main piece of painful paperwork was condition reports. And this was done really in a very analog way. And in fact, the only digital uh, aspect that was added over the last couple of years before that was digital photography. And if anything, that actually kind of made things worse because now we were taking hundreds and thousands of digital images and then just dumping them on like an image network folder drive for exhibitions and loans and displays and things. And so those images would live separately from the analog paper report. And we couldn't afford to print off, hundreds and thousands of photos every exhibition. And so we would actually have to just draw, a picture of the artwork and then draw damages on top of them. And then, I mean, and taking a step back, the whole reason for doing this paperwork, condition reports, is for insurance purposes, and also for collection management purposes. But mainly for exhibitions, it's because you're borrowing an artwork from another organization and you're saying, okay, I take responsibility, I take liability for this thing while it's traveling and transit and being installed and unpacked. And, those are kind of key points of risk when you're moving artwork. About 70% of damage happens in transit. And so you want to make sure that you're documenting, did it arrive safely? Was it okay in transit? Is it all good? And how do I make sure that I look after this thing properly while it's in my care? That's kind of the purpose of a condition report. It's a little bit like when you rent a car and you say, okay, there's a scratch on the hood
Yeah.
already there, nothing to do with me. Thank you. For now, I take responsibility for this thing. And so that's why we do condition reports. But the process of it was really frustrating, really unconsistent, unstandardized. I could, every day I could decide squiggly line means something new for me today, means tear one day, could mean scuff tomorrow. You don't know. It's just really, and that means that there's a lot of ambiguity and kind of vagueness around how to look after these multi-million pound important cultural things. And sometimes we would get condition reports that had, handwritten notes in 3 different languages. I'm supposed to try and figure this out. This is a legally binding document I have to sign. And so it's stressful, and just really a painful process. And so I was really interested when the iPad came out in helping to improve this for everyone to gain more time back for actual restoration work, for everyone to be more clear on, how to properly protect artwork that was in your care. And also to help guide people that might not have conservation training who are doing these reports. A lot of reports are done by non-conservators in the ecosystem. And so I had this big, R&D phase of trying to work out what the needs were, what the kind of specification should be, I started attending a lot of startup events to try and understand, how I could actually realize this thing, and found a company. As a museum conservator, I didn't know a whole lot about business
Yeah.
or startups or technology or any of that really. But I won a Google Campus elevator pitch competition, which gave me a little bit of money towards development of a prototype. I attended another Westminster Hub event that was called How to Attract an Angel Investor. And one of the speakers was Tim Jackson, who became my mentor and first investor and chairman. And so that's kind of how my startup journey began.
Very good. So it was clearly the business is clearly founded out of a lot of pain, and people that I've spoken to are usually in one of two camps. They're either in a business and they think that they can do it themselves, or they're in a job and they're experiencing a lot of pain and they think I can fix this. So it's good that we're in that end. 'Cause the percentage is more on the other side, so it's good that we can go through that. How? So you mentioned now that you've got a mentor and an investor. What's the early days of the business like? What are you working on? I would guess that it's you doing everything, or do you have some developers doing it on that side, and you're focusing on other things?
So in the early days, which is going back, 10 years, I was a one-woman band. Initially, I got enough investment to quit my job to focus on this full time. I worked with those developers I mentioned were helping me with the prototype as part of the Google Campus Award. And I then continued working with them until I could afford to hire my own internal developers. And that happened after we had the prototype. We did a beta um, phase of with working with around 20 different organizations to get them to try it out and commit to buying it if they liked it. And that's when I was able to have enough traction to do kind of a proper round of funding. I was introduced to most of my new investors through my first investor and mentor, Tim Jackson. He was part of a few different syndicates and groups of angel investors. And so he helped me do the rounds. I did a lot of pitching and of course, learned some things along the way. One thing was I realized in hindsight I undervalued the company initially a bit.
Right.
I think, that's maybe what comes with having a mentor who is a wonderful mentor, and I wouldn't be here, without him. But obviously, he was perhaps motivated for that valuation to be a bit lower as the first investor in it.
Yeah.
And also, in the UK market, it's different from other markets. We all know we feel like Silicon Valley gives crazy valuations very early on without much traction. The UK market is much more conservative, as is the European. And so trying to navigate those as somebody without any experience is just really challenging, I think.
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned like the beta program that you ran at the start. How do you go about getting those on board? Is it pure brute force of going out and door knocking and ringing them up and say, we've got this thing, do you want to try it out? Or is there more a strategic approach to it?
Well, it's funny you ask that because in fact, my investor, Tim, challenged me. Like he felt that the mark of being investment ready was having a list of 20 organizations that agreed to do this beta trial.
Right.
And so I had to do that before I was able to get any money at all. So that's pretty motivating. And I think from, he was testing to see if I could sell because to be fair enough, as a museum conservator, that's certainly an unknown variable. And luckily, it turned out that I'm pretty good at selling myself and my idea. And I started with my, existing network and contacts. So my first sign up actually came from who then became my first paying customer was Stephen Friedman Gallery, and that was a gallery that I had recently worked for and helped them out of a little crisis that they had. So they kind of owed me a bit. And so That's how I started off, was by going to my friends, my friendly people, and then kind of, spreading out from there, asking, people who knew other people. And so it was very much kind of initially coming from my own network.
Do you find that, or do you think that that you were good at sales? Well, it probably ties into both things actually. Um, but being good at sales is just being able to understand the pain points that people are experiencing, and being able to position your service to fix those. So do you think having or been through what the people that you're trying to sell to have been through, that must give you a big advantage?
Absolutely. I think that's really true. And I also think that sales has changed, the kind of old fashioned hard sell mentality, right, is to kind of ram it down people's throats. And you're very much focused on, you need to make your quotas, and then it's all about you, right? Whereas the sort of newer idea of selling, which is much more soft, is really just, I'm here to help you get what you need, tell me what you need, and I will try to work out and figure out how I can help you. And it's a much more um engaging and collaborative kind of approach. And so I definitely think that I have that, and that was always kind of how I approached it. I think that some of the big challenges for me was that I went to this, like, the dark side from the point of view of the museums, right? They have a little bit of mistrust around commercial um, entities. And so when I went from a nonprofit, I had the kind of credibility from Tate, right? But as in terms of selling to other museums, who were the ones that I understood the best, there was a blocker there, because I was now in this evil commercial empire. And I tried to explain to them, look, I've sacrificed my own ability to do restoration work so that I can give you more time to do what you love to do. I'm not a bad guy here in this scenario. I'm just really trying to help you. But I did find, actually, through my approaching the different, sectors in the ecosystem of condition reporting, which is, it's buying and selling. So it's private collectors, it's auction houses, it's fine art shippers, because, as I mentioned, transit is like a key point of risk. It is insurers, it is commercial galleries and museums. And so, although my first idea was really to help conservators at museums, I found out through the course of trying to sell to each of these different sectors that actually they were the toughest sell, and I would have to kind of de-emphasize them. In my win-loss analysis, I found that, commercial galleries and shippers actually had shorter sales cycles, bigger budgets, fewer decision makers involved, fewer committees involved. And that's another problem with museums. They're very slow to adopt new things because they decide things by committee. I have to go through lots of different levels of management to get anything to happen. And that's part of the reason it's very, very slow. And they're, very bureaucratic and have budgetary issues as well. And so I found that I really needed to focus on the shippers and the galleries, even though that wasn't my personal, wish, was really to help
Yep.
museums. And actually, what I found later on was kind of a better approach for museums, was to partner with a nonprofit and approach them through that. And in fact, things kind of aligned nicely, because I also became very concerned about the climate emergency. In 2019, I had this kind of moment where I was protesting with Extinction Rebellion in Trafalgar Square, and I was in front of the National Gallery in London, and I was thinking, these guys have a massive carbon footprint. It's not really necessary, and it's not something that's really understood. Even my fellow protesters here probably have no clue that this is going on. And actually, I probably would make a much bigger difference trying to help lead my industry into more sustainable practices, rather than just being like a body in a protest. And so at that point, I started to look at, the carbon footprint of arts organizations, and I found that the biggest three are staff travel, freight, which is art travel essentially, and buildings. And buildings, because art is generally placed in very specific climate control parameters. You probably have noticed in museums and galleries being cold year round. That's because they have the HVAC system running 24 hours a day in order to support this very, 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 very narrow banding. And the Tate Modern, for example, just that one building is the carbon footprint equivalent of 28,000 homes. And that's after a 50% reduction. So it's pretty big carbon footprint. And anyway, I thought, I'm in a good position because of being a CEO of a tech startup. That's really how this kind of exponential change can happen, right? Is through standardized technology adoption. And so I developed features and tools to help address those three biggest carbon footprint categories. And I teamed up with a nonprofit that is dedicated to sustainability in museums and heritage in that sector. And they really focus on educating and helping kind of hold hands museums to transition to more sustainable practices. And so I said, okay, well, we can be the tech tool that helps underpin, those changes. And through that partnership, we have been much more successful with approaching museums. So I'm happy to say that in the end, I was able to circle back to museums.
Has that? I guess it's been quite a breakthrough, because I know it's hard. It's been hard to get in. You've covered off that it's hard to get into the museums on the technology side, but the positioning it as the like lowering their carbon footprint has been the way to eventually sort of get through to them. So that's interesting, because I definitely, you don't think of you think of museums being a building and nothing changes, and you don't need all the travel, and you don't need to move things around. So it's it's an interesting like sort of pivot in positioning to them that's been able to get you in there.
Yeah, yeah. It's I definitely felt like, we had to pivot initially and really focus on galleries and shippers, for a long time, as I have mentioned. And, museums at the moment probably make up 20% of our customer base, and galleries probably 40%, and shippers 20%. So, that together they're about 60%, which is 3 times as much as a kind of museum base. And then, we also have, of course, as I mentioned, like private collections and auction houses and churches and other sort of random things.
Yeah.
Also, even corporate, collections and financing people that give loans against art as collateral. So once you really start to delve into the ecosystem of condition reports, there's these different players. It's still, still very niche. But actually one of the areas that we're really interested in expanding on is kind of adjacent markets. We've been working a lot recently with insurers, and that's also been a really interesting route to market to explore. And one of the loss adjusters that we've been working with is really keen to help us get into, for example, musical instruments in cars. And another insurer working with is really interested in helping us get into wine. So archaeology is another area that I'm really interested in. And that is actually because, personal interests of just liking ancient stuff. But I'm aware that looting is a big problem in archaeology. And documenting what you've got is one of the best things you can do to help prevent and discourage looters, but also recover things if they do get looted. And so I'm quite interested in getting into that. And I know that because of, again, technology, I think about 5 or 6 years ago when LiDAR became widely used in archaeology, which is like satellite imaging that can show you like 5 or 6 feet beneath like tree cover or sand if it's Egypt, which can show you the outline of buildings. of ancient ruins. And so they found just like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of new sites through that technology. So there's a like a backlog of lots of archaeology to do.
Good stuff. We'll go into like what Articheck actually does then. So maybe it might be we've touched on the things that like the pain points that it solves, but maybe like the actual software itself, and maybe go into some examples of how it's helped people.
Sure. So our we have, a lot of different types of customers who use our system in different kinds of contexts, right?
Yeah.
I mentioned that when you're doing an exhibition or a loan for an exhibition, that's a point where you would normally do condition reports because of this risk around transit. But there's also collection management. Good practice collection management is another reason to do condition reports. One of our customers, for example, was Eton College, and they wanted to do a survey of their whole collection. And so one of the other kind of big challenges in the industry is that you often have very few people looking after very large collections. And so, you can have just a couple of people that are responsible for hundreds of thousands or even millions of objects, and they can just become really overwhelmed and not know where to begin and how to help things. And so you tend to get this situation where people just pull stuff off of a shelf because it's in front of them and try and sort out this thing that they've just seen on a shelf, rather than actually, having like priorities and measurable outcomes and the ability to argue for bigger budgets because you want to do X, and really have a successful project where you make a big impact and difference to your collection, right? It's very difficult for collection managers to make those kinds of cases for things they want to do because they just don't have very many data points around like what the priorities should be of the collection. And so that's an area that we would also love to help bring focus. The Eton College, as I mentioned, they did a survey in 5 years. One person was able to do 200,000 condition reports, which is, they said we only were able to do this because of Articheck. What one conservator was able in 11 days to do, I think it was 800 reports, which is like really unheard of kind of efficiency in the industry. And of course, that's because, doing things digitally is, better, more efficient. We have been honing and iterating our product to be more and more efficient. So of course, it depends on the level of detail that you want to add. But if you just really want to get a few key data points together, about a wide, high volume of objects, then you now, have a system where you can do that, and you can do it on a mobile device, and you can do it, very quickly. You can do a report in just like a minute or so. You can have a basic report together and an image with that. And so that's kind of a game changer for collection management.
How many would they have been able to do without the software?
Well, if you think about the process, right? So most surveys are done today with an Access database or a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And so with a spreadsheet, you have a risk of, only the person that's doing that spreadsheet understands what it is and what the little like abbreviations are and what it's saying. And then that person can leave and you've just completely lost all of that knowledge. But even the process of actually doing the survey, because they're on a laptop, do it at a spreadsheet, and they have to drag that laptop to the thing that they want to think about and talk about. It doesn't have a camera either, so they have to just describe it with text.
Right.
And so if you can imagine, dragging your laptop into spreadsheet, trying to like look through and understand your spreadsheet and what your abbreviations are, and like, okay, 1 to 4, 4 means it's unstable and it needs immediate attention, and 1 means it's in good condition, and what do I think about this thing, and how do I describe it, and how do I write that down? And there's this study that showed that when you're kind of focusing on documenting and then focusing on observing, you're using 2 different parts of your brain, and so it's quite disruptive to go back and forth between those 2 processes. And so, for example, one of the things we try and do to minimize that distraction and disruption in your brain, is to allow somebody to use Siri so they can do voice dictation, and they can do it like while they're looking at something. So I can, my coffee mug, if I'm looking at it while I'm describing it, I'm actually able to say, okay, well, there's this like drip glaze that's brownish tan, and it's doing this like arc of a 45 degrees. It's just so much easier to describe it while you're looking at it, rather than kind of make a mental note and then go type something and then make another mental note and then go type something. And also, of course, images are worth 1,000 words, and you're able to just take a quick snap. It's automatically connected to the record on your mobile phone. Then that's just so much easier than trying to describe. I mean, it sounds crazy and ancient, right? I'm sure to you, but
Yeah.
but this industry is unfortunately stuck in the past, and so their working practices are really ancient and sad.
Do you provide like training onto it as well? It's not just, here's a software, here's a login, off you go and go.
Oh
Right.
yeah. I mean, we have like a suite of training videos that everyone can refer to. And we also do online training or in-person training if we're in the city where you are, or we can, make a trip and we're happen to be somewhere where you are, we can do in-person training as well. It depends on the size of the client, and, we're constantly thinking about how we can improve onboarding and make sure that we're driving engagement. And what we do find is that we have often super users in a lot of organizations, where what we would really like to do is deeply embed Articheck in their practices that would require having, a broader user base.
Yeah.
And so that's a challenge that we're thinking about now. How do we do that? We've been thinking about, should we change our pricing model so that we're not, discouraging people from having a lot of users? What are the best ways to kind of more deeply embed ourselves in their working practices?
Very good. Is there anything else that you want to touch on what the business does before we go into like the what's next part?
Well, I guess there's something, so another kind of interesting thing about what we have been doing is that, so I mentioned about the sustainability stuff, right?
Yeah.
And we had an opportunity over the pandemic to create a new product along those lines. So I mentioned that uh, staff travel is one of the big
Yeah.
categories. And during the pandemic, so the standard operating procedure for museums is to send a human chaperone with art to oversee transit, to try and reduce those risks of damage in transit. And of course, there's a large carbon footprint as well as cost associated with sending somebody, business class flights along with art that's also traveling by air, usually. And so we developed a product called Virtual Courier, which would allow them to remotely oversee artwork in transit. And so this, I think, is potentially a game changer for the industry. It is, it's an industry which is slow to change. And although a lot of people did virtual couriering during the pandemic because they were forced to, a lot of people also went back to their old working practices
Yeah.
after the pandemic. But they're still, talking about and thinking about the fact that this is cheaper. This is, better from a carbon footprint point of view. A lot of museums, unfortunately, right now, with all of the funding cuts that Trump has done in America, are in sort of already dire straits about their funding, and so probably will have to find ways to reduce their costs, including things like virtual courier. And even on the commercial side as well, it's like, you get shipment notifications about your Amazon socks and your groceries than you don't about your 5 million pound painting. So that's kind of silly. So that's what we're trying to help bring to the industry is shipment notifications and oversight, remote oversight. We realize not just for transit, but also for other workflows within the industry, which include, maybe things in insurance, loss adjustments, valuations, all kinds of different overseeing overseeing installation and for art fairs and all kinds of different things. So that's nice. That's something that we can kind of bring to the industry in terms of driving efficiencies and reducing costs in various ways. So it was nice that we were able to see the opportunity during the pandemic and build something that wasn't just for the pandemic, but actually probably should have a much longer life.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, we'll go into what's next then. I know you've got an exciting deal that should be done by now, by the time that this is released. Or it's going to get completely cut out and we won't be able to use it. But yeah, what's next? What's next for the business? And I know you want to talk through that deal as well.
Yeah, so we just sent off the finalized contract for signature of a super exciting deal with Art Bridges, which is funded by Alice Walton, the Walmart heiress. And this program is going to involve, hopefully, hundreds of museums over the course of the next 6 or 7 years, which will be given the opportunity of basically having a safe and funded space with which to change some of their working practices to be more modern, more efficient, more accessible. It's called the Accessible Loans Program. And it's really all about driving successful loans and increasing access to good quality art in America. So it's a really wonderful program, and we're really excited to be a part of it. And we are the kind of technology partner that is going to, I mentioned virtual courier, that's going to be part of it. And also just being the technical platform that enables this kind of loans workflow to be more efficient and cost effective. So, as well as more sustainable. And that's really exciting. I mentioned to you about buildings and the HVAC system running 24 hours a day.
Yep.
So the green thing to do now is to relax those parameters and to place anything that is really fragile within its own little micro environment in a frame or a display case. And so again, we're helping with the kind of technology provision to oversee that.
Yeah, so it seems like constantly always looking to add products and services to the software. It's not just about keeping the same one and trying to sell more of that. It's which will give you more opportunity for companies to come on in one part of the business, and then they'll realize, oh, you also do this and this and this, and that'll be a nice in as well.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing is, you need to keep that competitive advantage, right? You need to build your moat. If you are just really stagnant with your product offering, there's more chance of competitors nipping at your heels. We're considered the best, and we want to keep it that way in terms of our industry. And I think another really important factor for us is cybersecurity. Because the kind of standard operating procedure for our industry for sharing condition reports is by email and attached PDF. And that's really not ideal from a cybersecurity point of view about, location and value information about very high value goods. And so, insurers also have said, like, we're not going to cover if there's a theft because of poor cybersecurity. And a lot of museum people, they just don't even no, they're not aware of these kinds of things. And they actually pay for, very high security kind of procedures for shipping. So like only their stuff goes in the truck and it's unmarked, and there's an escort riding behind it that's also unmarked, and and like thousands and thousands and thousands for high security stuff. But then they're like, okay, I've just texted you the value and location of these things. And so they just really, it's something we kind of need to help educate them on, is like, let's move away from that and let's move towards sharing through a platform like ours, which has two-factor authentication and password protection and encryption and, all of these things that upgrade their cybersecurity.
Very good. Very good. If people like the sound of you and like the sound of the business and want to check them out, where can they find you?
Well, our website is articheck.com, Articheck. And that's probably the best place to get started, to have a look at kind of what we do and what we're about. But we're pretty, interested and dedicated in helping the art world to come kicking and screaming into the 21st century.
Very good. Annika, it's been great to speak, and I hope, fingers crossed, this deal gets over the line and we can use all of the podcasts that we just recorded and people aren't missing out on a chunk.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope so too, for more reasons than just that, Tom.